let's get started. So welcome everyone. I'm Adam. I've been a landlord for over a decade. I founded one of the first online estate agents and later a top online letting agent. I'm now with Mashroom, which I believe really is the next generation landlord platform. So as I said before, please do follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and join our private Facebook community landlord group for latest news and updates on legislation. Also, the landlord group's great because if you've got any issues or problems or questions, you get really, really good discussion and answers around those questions. So it's really worth being a part of that. So just head on over there. As I said, also, you get all this great information as well, past webinars, tax webinars, all kinds of things, just by going and joining mashroom.com. It's all in your dashboard once you've joined. So lots of free tools there as well to use, including free listings on Rightmove and Zoopla. So today I'm joined by Vanessa Warwick, who you'll know from Property Tribes, to talk more about the burning questions landlords have this month. And I've also got George Sinclair here, who many of you may know. He's part of our sales team and helps landlords day in, day out with all the needs, insurance, mortgages, etc. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get going. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. So please do use the Q&A box below and ask us any questions. We may not get to them all, but we'll certainly try and get to it as many as possible throughout the webinar. So before we start, I'll just hand over to George, who will tell us a little bit more about Mashroom and what we do.
First of all, yeah, I'm George. Okay. I've got a background predominantly in real estate, having worked as a lettings agent once upon a time. I also have a keen interest in Islamic finance. So if you do wish to talk about any Sharia compliant finance, then my door is always open for you. A quick overview of Mashroom. Yes, we are an online lettings platform, helping you find your next tenant. We also offer free listings on Rightmove and Zoopla, as Adam just alluded to a moment ago. On top of that, furthermore, we also have completely free tools in which makes your landlord life that little bit easier. A document storage tool, which is pretty much favorable for most of the landlords I speak to at the moment. Upload your EPCs, your gas safety and all that sort of stuff. Set a reminder, never miss it. Type in your postcode, somebody will go out, complete the task for you, come back and upload it to the platform. Nice and easy. You're not flicking through the yellow pages, looking for the closest chapter to complete these tasks for you. Okay. You also have a market valuation tool. Very, very useful considering that rents are increasing or in your area, what's happening and so forth. So yeah, jump on there and take a look at exactly that. Okay. Last thing, we have mentioned it in a few webinars before, is the expense tracker. Make sure you know your ingoings and your outgoings throughout your year. Okay. While all of this is free, we do have some paid for products as well. So naturally, things like your EPCs, your gas safety checks, your EICRs, tenant referencing, you can also sort those out for you as well. Obvious areas as well, which I'll mention in just a moment, but insurances, your rent guarantee insurance, your home emergency cover, and something which I'll just mention a bit further now, but buildings insurance. We've been inundated with requests on buildings insurance. Okay, now summer is clearly the time where everyone has historically been purchasing their homes, or summer's the time that it occurs to you that you've completely forgotten to renew your building insurance. Whichever one it is, we're here to help. Okay. Now, I completely appreciate as well, it's not the most thrilling part of being a landlord, but it is something naturally you need. Now, we've got an extensive building insurance team. Okay. All of our advisors are very well catered for, understand the industry and can help you out. With that being said, you can easily drop me and the rest of the team an email. My email is george.sinclair@mashroom.com. Furthermore, to make it a little bit easier, if you do have a renewal right this second, you can email over the statement of fact. We can build you a like-for-like quote, send it back over to you, and away you go. Means once again, you don't need to let anyone else or you in actual fact worry about it. Let us take that pressure off you. Lastly, happy Friday. It's the first of the month. Can you believe it? 1st of July. I would say have a fantastic weekend, but as I look outside, unfortunately, I'm greeted by rain clouds at the minute. But until then, have a fantastic day. Vanessa, Adam, back over to you.
Thanks, George. Well, it's sunny over here in the south, so So we're all right.
Thanks very much for rubbing that one in.
Good. Well, thanks, George. That's really good. So Vanessa and I will be covering the trending topics today, including the latest government reforms. I think there's going to be a lot to talk about there. Interest rate rises, we'll touch on that today. Property training, are they just get rich quick scams? I know what I think about that, but we'll talk about that a bit later. And then a quick head-to-head on city versus suburbs. So the latest rental reform white paper has been hailed as the biggest shake-up of the private rented sector in 30 years. The proposals will be welcome news for tenants who will see added security and greater powers to challenge poor ethics from their landlords. However, it's the law-abiding landlords who are likely to be impacted most by the following the outlined proposals. Under the white paper, tenants will have more power to end their tenancy quickly if their circumstances change or they live in inadequate housing. However, with the removal of Section 21, landlords and agents have to provide a legitimate reason for reclaiming their property. So while tenants can leave quickly and easily, the same cannot be said for landlords. While this is great for tenants who have poor quality landlords or genuine reasons they need to move, decent landlords, like probably most of us or all of us that are on the webinar today, aren't given the same support. There's also a proposal to introduce a private renters ombudsman that we'll talk about, and landlords can no longer stipulate that pets are not allowed. So Vanessa, lots and lots to talk about. Let's start with the ending of tenancies, change of balance of power, I think. So what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Adam, I think it's really important to say that this is a white paper. There's a very, very long way to go before it becomes into statute. It has to go through the House of Commons, the House of Lords, etc. This, to me, is just a people-pleasing, vote-grabbing paper, just with very broad brushstrokes about what's going to happen. But as we all know, the devil is always in the detail in anything to do with property. And this white paper was sadly lacking in a lot of that detail, and that has caused a lot of confusion. And confusion is not good at the best of times, but when it occurs in a very challenging market conditions that we're experiencing now, it's even worse. It makes it impossible for people to plan or see a way forwards. We've had one landlord on Property Tribes say, I can't reduce my portfolio fast enough. And that seems to be the general direction of travel for a lot of landlords. They see this white paper as just really the final straw that broke the camel's back. But I want to just say that Sean Hooker, who's the head of the property redress scheme, he has stated that this is not oven-ready policy. No. This is a wide-ranging brief, if you like, that has to go through a lot of processes before it comes law. So I think from the get-go, I want to say it's very important not to make any decisions based on this at all, because we just don't know what's happening with it and what's actually going to be written into law. So that's my first point. Don't take it too literally. There's not enough detail. There are things that concern landlords in there for sure. The removal of Section 21 is one of them. We have discussed this at length, Adam, in previous webinars, which we can link to on the video, but essentially it's absolutely vital to landlords to feel that they can gain repossession of their property easily. It's very much a confidence thing. And also we know that lenders require to be able to gain repossession as well. If they've had to repossess the property from the landlord, they will want to remove the tenants. And I was actually involved in an article in the Telegraph last week about how lenders might consider the removal of Section 21. So, there's so much to consider around all of this. And when you just have these very big brushstroke kind of comments or ideas that have no detail in them, it's really hard to determine what the actual outcome will be. It could be, a year's time, 2 years' time. So that's my thoughts really initially, is to say, don't make any rash decisions based on this white paper. We don't know what's going to come into effect and when. But I think what it does do is it gives an indication of direction of travel of the government that we were already aware of and have been for the last 5 years. But we can see that the power balance is shifting a lot more towards tenants.
And that's because of voters, isn't it? There's more tenant voters than there is landlord voters.
Precisely, yes.
That's exactly why that's happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we saw the equivalent of Section 21 go in Scotland, and they're beefing up. They beefed up the equivalent of Section 8 so there was easier to recover possession due to rent arrears, and they tried to put some court reforms in, and it didn't really work. I think, and that's the similar kind of ideas around there about having more clauses in Section 8 for recovering with rent arrears, and having more of a mediation service within the courts. But having the courts reformed is there may be some good plans out there for that, but whether it actually happens and if it actually works is probably unlikely, isn't it?
Well, this is another very good point, Adam. The court system is completely underfunded as it is. We're hearing of up to 12 months to get a court hearing for possession. It's just, it's very frustrating to me, because we've already got so much legislation in place to protect both landlords and tenants. The existing legislation and regulations are not enforced. So keep to pile on red tape when you haven't even got enough enforcement in place for the existing regulations. It just seems so pointless to me. There's many legitimate reasons why people would want to gain possession of their property again. One of them is that they might want to sell up. Well, fair enough, it's their property. If they want to end their landlord days, then that's surely their choice. The second reason is that you might want to move a family member or a friend in there. It's your property. You should have there who you want. You may indeed want to undertake a massive refurb on the property, whereby you might need it vacant for 3 months. That might be another reason to serve a Section 21 notice, or a no fault eviction as it's called, and that's a completely legitimate reason. You might be doing energy upgrades. So again, I'm going back to this point that it hasn't been thought through. We have to hope that industry stakeholders and trade bodies like the National Residential Landlords Association, we have to hope that they can be a voice of reason and sense in all of this, and point out all of these little issues which are going to trip all of this up. One member on Property Tribes has said the government wants to control housing without actually having to provide any of it. And I think that's a good comment, because they're just not creating enough social housing, as we've discussed previously. So private sector landlords have to take up the slack, and yet they're making our lives so incredibly difficult, and just totally reducing any profit margins that landlords might have, which have always been very slim in recent times anyway. So it's badly thought through, and not enough detail, and it's caused confusion, and a lot of landlords have just said enough is enough.
And yet private landlords are held to such higher standards than social housing.
Yeah, exactly.
We the gas safeties, electrical safeties, all these standards are there for social housing, but they don't seem to be under as much scrutiny to meet them, and under the same pressure to meet them as private landlords.
Yeah, I mean, there's people on the chat asking when this comes into effect. Well, we don't know. That's the short answer. It's going through consultation now, and we urge everybody to write to your MP and complain about it, and explain how it's going to negatively impact your business, because we need to know and have confidence that we can gain possession, and sometimes there's very legitimate reason why it's not the fault of the tenant, but you need to gain possession. So yeah, the other things that are coming through in this white paper, Adam, that we landlords cannot refuse tenants in receipt of benefits. Well, hang on a minute. There's quite a few lenders that actually state in their mortgage terms and conditions that you cannot rent to a tenant in receipt of housing benefit. Secondly, because of government actions, the stock of private rental property has diminished so much that we've now got bidding wars for properties. They're in such scarce supply. I myself had 107 inquiries in 48 hours for my one-bed flat in London N5 that came up recently, and I had 17 viewings and 5 offers. Now, in those instances, I'm going to see the tenant profile, anybody in receipt of benefits. Sorry, I've got a tenant that's not in a receipt of benefits. So I don't see how they're going to enforce this. Landlords should have a choice.
And we could end up in a ridiculous system where you're being challenged over your decisions.
Indeed.
And being challenged on discrimination, which would be a crazy place to be. And yet you're being asked to take, for want of a better word, but poorer quality tenants potentially, and yet you're being given less powers to deal with that tenant if it all goes wrong. So that is a worry, isn't it?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Adam. Absolutely. And we know that we're going into certainly a recession, if not a depression, that affordability is being stretched. I think all of us are going to be ramping up our tenant referencing and making it even more robust, or certainly as robust as possible. And we're going to be looking for good quality tenants to mitigate our risk. And, with tenants in receipt of benefits, you're dealing with the DWP, which is like this enormous blank wall that is virtually impossible to break through. And that again puts a lot of landlords off. Obviously, there's many other issues with housing benefit, which we won't go into today. But landlords are looking to get the best possible tenants to mitigate their risk, and they're sensible to do that because it's a business that we're running here, and everything about business is about mitigating risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, what I do now is I get a guarantor on every tenant, I get rent guarantee insurance. And guarantors have always worked well for me, because it's you've got someone else to go to, and very often if a tenant isn't paying their rent or has missed a month, and you say, well, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to go to your guarantor, that very quickly resolves the resolution, the problem, because they don't want you going to their guarantor. So I think it's a really good idea just to up the protection of your tenants, basically, and you can do that with rent guarantee insurance, and you can do that with really good referencing and with getting a guarantor on your tenants.
Well, belts and braces, definitely in this environment. But then what's going to happen to rent guarantee insurance if Section 21 goes? Maybe it's going to become a lot more expensive. I don't know how the insurance industry will look at that. I mean, as we all know, due to COVID, rent guarantee insurance premiums have gone up very, very significantly in the last 2 to 3 years. But yes, I think it's money well spent. And obviously Mashroom can assist with rent guarantee insurance as well, just to give landlord peace of mind, really. Well worth having that. I have it for all of my buy-to-let properties for sure.
And on the flip side of that, you've got to make sure that all your paperwork's in order, because insurance policies won't pay out. They'll ask you, have you got your gas safety in date? Have you got your EPC? Have you got your EICR? Did you serve your how to rent booklets correctly? Have you got a fully signed and executed contract which has been served to the tenant? And can you prove all these things? Any insurance policy is going to be looking for all your paperwork to be perfect. So it's really important. And of course, to issue a Section 21, you needed all of that. So you needed all of that.
Indeed. And, for rent guarantee insurance, the tenant has to pass referencing. And I don't think that you can get rent guarantee insurance on tenants in receipt of benefits. So, there's all these different, things that are going on in the sector that obviously haven't been thought through properly.
Glad you mentioned that, because our rent guarantee insurance at Mashroom you can have if your tenants are in.
Oh, that's good to know.
They will have to pass referencing, but that will be into the referencing takes their benefits into account with the income. So as long as they pass their income multiple and they've got good credit history, which you would want anyway, whether you've got insurance or not, you will be able to use our rent guarantee insurance.
Well, let's talk about the pets side of things, Adam, because I've got 3 Bengal tiger cats myself. They are part of my family. I can't bear to be without them. I am very sympathetic to any tenant that wants a pet. The thing is that now, through this new white paper, it's being suggested that it will almost become mandatory, that landlords have to allow pets. Again, can't see how that's going to work in reality, because we've got leasehold flats that prohibit keeping a pet in the lease. Just, as one example. How about if you're a self-managing landlord and you have a pet allergy? How can you go around to check your property or do whatever you need to do if there's a pet there? I mean, these are all the little details that just haven't been thought through. In principle,
going to need to be thought through, though, aren't they?
Huh?
They're going to need to be thought through, aren't they?
Well, they are, and in principle, I'm good to have a well-behaved pet in a property. I think that tenants tend to stay longer because they know how hard it has been to rent with their pet, and it's given a lot of landlords a competitive edge to actually allow pets. But now it seems that competitive edge may be taken away. But there will surely have to be caveats in this where you're not forced to take on a pet. And I think, we've got to see evidence that the pet is well cared for, that it's well behaved. I think one of the easiest ways to assess whether you're going to let a pet into your property or not is go and visit it in its existing home. You can see if it's, if the dog's chewed all the skirting boards or the cats have peed all over the stairs or whatever it might be. You can actually see what kind of impact the pet has had on its existing home. I think that's a good thing to do. But I also do want to point out that the Cats Protection and Dogs Trust have some very useful and helpful resources on letting to tenants with pets, which I would highly recommend that you go and research and use, because they give some really good indicators of the kind of things to look out for, and to make sure that the pet is cared for properly. We have issues of dogs being left in flats all day and just barking the entire block down. I mean, these are all the kind of things that again, haven't been thought of.
And I don't want pets in, I don't like this because I just don't want pets in my flats. I had one, I love dogs. I had dogs growing up and I love dogs, but because I've had dogs, I know what hard work it is to keep the smell of a dog out of furniture and carpets and things like that. So it is tough. You've got to think about that when you're reletting. And then with cats, I've had one experience with cats in a property where I had quite a lot of damage done to my skirting boards, and had to do quite a lot of redecoration work because of that.
I agree. I think this is where mid-term property inspections comes in as well. If you are going to rent to a tenant with a pet, you should check up maybe once every 3 or every 6 months with a mid-term inspection to see how that pet is behaving in the house, and make sure that one puppy hasn't turned into 3 puppies. And we hear all of these horror stories. So yes, I mean, it is a tricky one. I think people, I recognize, as I said, how wonderful companion animals are and how they enrich your lives, and they certainly help with mental health after especially what we've been through in the last 2 or 3 years. So yes, I'm for it, but there needs again to be caveats. I don't want pets in flats. I'm happy to have them in the freehold houses with gardens and so on.
I think there's a knock-on effect. Sorry, Vanessa. I think there's a knock-on effect here as well, that this caveat that we keep coming back to, the only 2 pets that we refer to here is dogs and cats. I mean, I'm not trying to be flippant here, but an iguana,
snake.
Like a snake. Nobody's got tigers and lions, granted, but how big or small? A Chihuahua is going to do X amount of damage versus a Rottweiler, for example, and all of these things. And so, how far does a caveat go? If you've got a parent, one child, or you're allowed to have a medium-sized Cavalier King's Charles, for example. Whereas if you're a single person in a 1-bedroom flat, no problem, you can have a Doberman. I mean, how far do we go there? And it would just be a knock-on effect. And subsequently, Vanessa, you mentioned something a moment ago of one puppy turning into 3 and so forth. And somebody's asked the question with regards to what if the tenant decides to run a business in puppies, and in turn at any one point there could be 12 puppies in there. As much as they seem very cute, those 12 puppies turn into 12 very large dogs.
Actually, George, you make a good point here, because this ties into the 5-week deposit, where you can't take more than 5 weeks deposit, and you'd want more than 5 weeks deposit if you've got a pet. Perhaps you'd want 12 weeks, which you can't legally take now, but you could get if you had a deposit replacement scheme.
I think, there's also, we've had some discussions on Property Tribes about a pet premium, and most people seem to be adding about £25 a month to the rent for a pet. Very similar if you go, to a holiday park, as I do in our motorhome, they'll say, how many pets are you bringing? And you pay a little bit extra for each pet. I don't think that's unreasonable, to be honest, but I think you also need to have extra kind of cleaning protocols in place at the end of the tenancy to do a very, very deep clean, because obviously pets can unfortunately leave smells, which smell is one of the most off-putting things to an incoming tenant. Sally has said that we shouldn't assume that tenants on benefits will be a bad tenant. Sorry, we do need to clarify that, Sally. We're not assuming that they are a bad tenant. Of course, there are many, many, many tenants in receipt of tenants who are in receipt of benefits who are very, very good tenants. I think what we were trying to sort of say was that landlords have a greater choice of tenant demographic now. And, with all the issues with the DWP and trying to get direct payment to landlord if there's arrears, landlords obviously feel more comfortable going to a young professional tenant with a full salary. And Barry has stated that if you do get direct payment to landlord, you can be exposed to clawback if it turns out the tenant has made a false or erroneous claim, which is absolutely correct. So yeah, basically there's pros and cons to everything, and that's what we try and tease out.
It's about risk, isn't it? I mean, one of my best tenants was a young lady who was a nurse, and she was in receipt of housing benefit as well, because her nurse's wage didn't cover the rent that she needed in London, and she had a young son, and she was a fantastic tenant. The house was kept immaculately, payment of rent on time, never had a problem out of her, and she was fantastic. So, and it's just about weighing up, it's about the person, the referencing, and stacking them against who else is applying, and weighing up your risk in a business-like manner.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to another thing that has been highlighted in this white paper. Repayment of rent in non-decent homes. Well, what's the standard? What is a non-decent home? There's already some standards that are in place. Are they going to remain the same, be beefed up? We did have some concerns on Property Tribes that tenants could possibly some way abuse this, that maybe damage the property significantly towards the end of their tenancy and then try and reclaim their rent. I'm sure that if there's a possibility to reclaim rent off a landlord, that there's going to be certain delinquent tenants that are going to find a way to try and do that. Unfortunately, this again to me highlights the importance of an inventory and midterm property inspection.
Who makes that assessment? Who is going to make that assessment as well?
Well, exactly. Again, it just hasn't been thought through at all. We're seeing this shift of power from landlords to tenants. We've seen it over the last few years, and it's almost like the pendulum has swung just too far now. Some of these things are really concerning, and let's just hope that they never make it to fruition.
Well, I think this is really worrying, this one.
Watered down. Yeah, it is. It's very concerning.
You have a tenant in a property for a year or so, and they say that I want my bedroom repainting, and then you said, well, okay, maybe we'll talk about that, but I don't think it needs doing. It's only been done in the last year, something like that, and suddenly you're being threatened with well, this is not inhabitable. I want a recourse of rent because of this. It may not be the case. It may not end up like that once it's been assessed, but it's just another thing you can be sort of threatened with, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We know with tenancy deposit and other things that you have these ambulance chasing companies that start up and offer no win, no fee, etc. And this again will likely be exploited and abused by a certain minority. It is very concerning. Then we've got the end of the minimum term tenancies. ASTs, this to me is just bizarre. I thought they wanted tenants to have long-term security, not to be able to move out at the drop of a hat. They're talking about, flexibility and ability to move when they want and so on. Yeah, fine. But this is going to cause another problem. And in fact, we're already starting to see it. People are going to rent buy-to-let properties maybe for 3, 6, 9 weeks, because they want to check out the area, or they've got a short-term contract or something like that, and they don't want to go into a hotel, and they don't want to go into serviced accommodation or holiday lets, which is a lot more expensive. So I can see this being abused as well, people using buy-to-let properties as short-term accommodation, and just landlords experiencing a massive tenant turnover. I would have thought that the exact opposite was needed. I would be happy to grant a 2, 3, 5 year tenancy, but again, lenders don't like it. So we have this 12-month AST, which seemed to work, I would say, relatively well. Now they want to just give a complete end to any minimum term tenancy, and I can't see where that's going to go.
It doesn't make sense to me, because I thought part of the justification behind getting rid of Section 21 is security in your home. Tenants want to make a home out of private rented property, and they don't want to be under the pressure of being able to, after that fixed term, having to leave with 2 months' notice. So this kind of says the opposite, doesn't it? And it doesn't really make sense to me at all. It's kind of saying, well, let's just take every scenario and give it to you, and not think about the landlord, which is just doesn't make sense.
Wouldn't it be suggesting as well that perhaps you'd be able to add, I don't know, a short-term premium to it? If you wanted to take the property for 12, 24 months and the market rent is £1,000 a month, for example, but you're saying, no, actually, I'm fancying it for 6 weeks in essence. Well, fine, okay, it's going to be £1,500 a month then in that case, because you need to account for that in between of changing tenancies and so forth. But I'm sure there'll be an uproar if that were to be suggested. So yes. I'm not saying for a moment, but there's got to be harmony between every party here, surely.
It's not only that, George, it's that what defines a short hold tenancy is it's the tenant's main residence. That's the difference between having a tenancy and being a guest in a hotel or holiday let or short-term accommodation. So it's starting to blur the lines between these two different types of tenures. And again, I can just see it. I can see it causing problems, because I can't imagine you'd be able to put a short-term premium into a short hold tenancy. So devil is in the detail.
Yeah, precisely so.
Someone's going to be very busy with this if it all goes ahead. There's a lot of detail to work out, isn't there?
Well, there is, and it's good that the National Residential Landlords Association is our voice at a political level. I know they're working really hard in various different government committees and whatnot, trying to get the landlord's point of view put across. But now we're hearing of, because there's such a shortage of stock, tenants actually can't move on anywhere, and people that are wanting to sell up can't get vacant possession because the tenant can't find anywhere to move. I mean, this is just like a massive problem that's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until the government realizes that our housing market is pretty much broken, and the reforms that they're going to make are going to just exacerbate it. What they really need to be thinking about is how to increase the supply of private sector rental stock, because they are not supplying enough social housing, and if there was more private rental stock, then obviously the market forces would be less in favour of landlords, because it's all based on supply and demand, as we know. But do you think we've pretty much covered that topic?
Yeah. So just a quick, question. Given all this, do you still want to be a landlord? I do.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah. I absolutely do, because I totally believe in property as an investment. It's always served me well. Actually, if you are holding cash flowing assets in a very high inflationary environment and you maintain them and you keep the cash flow going, you can come out of it the other end in a very, very strong financial position. So I'm going to keep the faith with it. I am going to do what I can as an individual to fight against the things that I think are wrong, and try and be a voice for landlords in the work that I do on social media and so on, and with the NRLA, because I do a collaboration with them. And I get asked to take part in a lot of media with mainstream media, and I will always state the landlord's case there as well.
Good. And sorry, George, go on.
Sorry, all I was going to say, just somebody's asked or put on the group, and I have this conversation with landlords every single day. Somebody's mentioned that perhaps my properties, which are Airbnbs, might be the way to go. Now, what happens if everybody became an Airbnber? What would happen there? Wouldn't that in turn saturate the market, and we'd go the opposite way, where we would want to have ASTs once again? And it's such a strange this pendulum effect I'm finding, because I was speaking to a landlord the other day who found that a few years ago turned his several properties in Brighton into Airbnbs, and the time he was renting out the properties far outweighs over the 12 months, if you catch my drift.
It becomes a job, doesn't it?
And it was becoming, so the income was fantastic in comparison per month, but there was a lot of work that was being done. And then in turn, he's realized that he's had to somewhat drop the month or the nightly cost, because everybody in Brighton is now an Airbnb. Every property is now Airbnb. So subsequently, he's had to go back the other way and put his properties into ASCs again. So it's this pendulum effect.
It's definitely happening, George, and so much so that the government now has Airbnb and short-term lets in their sites, and they're talking about some very draconian measures to stop people having second homes, and certainly, they're going to put some extra taxes on if your home is not available to rent as a short-term let for a certain period of time, because a lot of people are using second home lets to kind of offset costs and things. So they're trying to restrict that. There's been a lot of issues in Cornwall with second homes, local community rising up against them. You're absolutely right. What the government has done is, and with Section 24, obviously, which doesn't apply to holiday and short-term lettings, they've pushed lots of landlords across into short-term lets, and that's reduced the stock of private rented accommodation on ASTs. But now those landlords are in that sector, and now that sector's becoming not only perhaps saturated, or certainly heading towards that, but it's also restricting access to housing for local people. So we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty here, because these are all the little nitty-gritty details that need to be considered. I mean, I was in Cornwall earlier in the year, and there's a lovely chap there that ran an adventure experience type business, and he said he couldn't open because he couldn't get enough staff, because nobody could afford the local housing. These are real problems, and this government is not addressing them in a manner that could solve them for the benefit of everybody. But again, they're trying to take so much control over other people's assets. I think that's a very worrying direction of travel.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, shall we move on to interest rate rises? So interest rates have gone up.
If we don't talk about it, Adam, does it go away?
Maybe we should try that. But unfortunately, I don't think it will work. So what's your advice, Vanessa? What should we be doing as landlords? I mean, I know what I'm doing. I'm just checking I'm protected and doing some calculations, adding up what my risk is if on mortgages that are coming off in the next couple of years, fixing things up that I can fix up. So it's just about being prudent and doing your calculations and understanding where your risk is really.
Well, of course, and it only impacts landlords that are leveraged with buy-to-let finance. And there's a large proportion of landlords that have unencumbered properties. And I just wanted to answer Francis's question. She said a regular mortgage lender will not allow Airbnb. You're absolutely correct, Francis. If you have an unencumbered property, you can do whatever you like with it, undertake any activity that you like with it. But clearly, if you are going to move from buy-to-let to short-term lets, holiday lets, then you will need to either get permission of your lender or you will need to refinance onto an appropriate mortgage product, because it's absolutely vital that you have the correct finance for the type of activity you're going to be undertaking. Otherwise, you will be breaching the terms and condition of your mortgage. So I think that's a good point. Obviously, Mashroom have a broker who can assist you with all your financing needs, and you should get in touch if you want to discuss any of these issues. But yes, interest rates are only going to go one way, and that is up. So I'm currently doing 2 remortgages. I'm going to go on to a 5-year fixed rate. These are obviously properties that are on SVRs. I think that it would be prudent in the current market conditions to look across all your properties and do it like a mass equity release. Just do it in one hit, fix all your rates, get a large chunk of cash, and then you can use that cash to maybe scale up when prices go down a bit, or maybe improve the energy efficiency of your existing stock, or maybe just have it as a rainy day fund. Because I know from my own experience that it can be very anxiety inducing if you don't have a nice little nest egg of cash in the background, because we all know that things can go wrong really quickly and fast in property. You can have suddenly 3 tenants not paying the rent, and some landlords work on such slim margins that they only need 1 tenant not paying, and then they're getting into serious financial difficulty. So yes, review your portfolio. If you're on fixed rates already, good stuff, you're okay. If you're on SVRs, you should definitely think about fixing, and I'm going for 5-year, although there's actually some quite attractive 7-year fixed rates out there as well.
Stress testing as well, I think, is important. So when I started, I was getting buy-to-let mortgages. Some of them were 6%, and that wasn't that long ago. So now what I do is I stress test the portfolio, saying, yes, okay, maybe I'll fix up for 5 years, but I want to understand that if I come off that fixed rate in 5 years and rates are 5-6%, which may not happen, but it could happen. What does it look like? What do my repayments look like at 5 or 6%? And just stress testing that and understanding how that's going to impact me, and coming up with a plan for if that's the case. And I think I sleep better at night for doing that. And also stress testing, what if it's 5%, 6%, and two tenants don't pay me their rent, and things like that. Although if you've got rent guarantee, there's less of a problem. But it's just maintaining cash flow is the biggest killer of any business. And it's just understanding how, if the worst happens, how you maintain that cash flow. So you can keep that asset going, because you look at a graph of property over the last 50 years, and it does only go in one direction. It has lots of dips and troughs, but it does generally go in one direction. And if you can survive those dips and troughs, then you'll generally be okay.
Well, indeed. And the other thing is that, if you make improvements to your properties through refurbishment or development, you're actually bypassing waiting long term for capital appreciation. You're forcing the appreciation inorganically, if you like, and that creates an equity buffer, which is also a kind of nice nice place to reside in when you're a landlord as well. Somebody's saying, Francis saying, what is SVR? It's standard variable rate. It's the rate that your mortgage reverts to after a fixed term ends, and lenders set their own standard variable rates. So when you're taking out a new mortgage product, you need to make sure that you know what the reversion rate is for that SVR. Somebody's saying you have to get permission from the council for Airbnb. Actually, that's not correct. In London, there is a 90-day rule, which if you're going to let your property for more than 90 days, you need to seek change of use planning permission. But in individual local authorities, I'm not aware of council permission, but of course you can check on your local authority website. They will have information about any regulations for short-term lets.
Should I fix for 2 or 5 years? Well, that's kind of a personal decision, because obviously for me, I don't want to sell my property for 15 years at least. So I would, and at these rates, I'd probably fix up for as long as possible. But that's my personal decision. I'm not recommending anyone else do that. You might want to sell your property in a couple of years' time, in which case you'd have a massive redemption fee if you fix for 5 years. So it is a personal decision. My personal feeling is that rates can only go one way. So let's take some deals where you can.
Kick the can down the road, I think, is the best way to put it. I'll worry about it in 5 years. And I know that sounds comical, but it's unfortunately true at the moment. The people that we're helping at the moment at Mashroom with regards to their mortgages is that we'll offer them all the ideas and different scenarios, and it's for you to decide. Is that, as Adam just alluded to, if you're looking to sell within the next 2 years, and it's just, I just want to get things set up, I just need a bit of grace for 2 years, then perhaps 2 year fix is good for you. If you want to stay and hold on to your property, or maybe you're new to being a landlord, what am I looking for? Then perhaps a 5 years, because you don't look to get rid of it. But we'll only be having this same conversation in 5 years' time anyway, with interest rates unfortunately going up.
And Anthony remembers rates in 1979 at 11.2%, and higher in the 80s, I think.
When you're setting up a 2 year fixed rate or a 5 year fixed rate, the mortgage arrangement fees are the same. So you can often pay about £2,500–3,000 lender setup fee. That's why I've been opting for a 5 year fixed rate, because I want that peace of mind. I'm not looking to do any equity release on those particular properties, and I want to lock in a good rate now. And rates are going to keep creeping up. So lenders are pulling products all the time. There's been products pulled last week. There's been products pulled yesterday. That's why you need a good broker who knows what the best rates are available. And if you're sitting on standard variable rates, you need to think about it now. Don't sit around and wait. Get some action going on that to lock in a fixed rate, I think. Actually, this is a great example of local authority completely local governments completely at odds with central government. Jonathan C has said that he owns 3 property in Megavissey in Cornwall. He's struggling to get planning permission for one of them because he wants to increase the minimum internal sizes, and he wants to rent out to 2 or 3 local inhabitants. So even the local authority is making it difficult for him to supply local housing. I mean,
crazy,
unbelievable.
Okay. Property training. Let's move on to property training, Vanessa.
Well, we've only got 5–10 minutes left. I don't think we've got enough time to go into this. This is one of my bugbears for those of you that know me. I'm very, very vocal on the topic. I do a lot of work around consumer protection. Essentially, what I call the wealth creation industry is totally unregulated. So you have all sorts of people in there making all sorts of claims about their wealth and success, and promising you that you can get into property with little or no money. I call it buying a ticket to see a unicorn, because that's what it is. Now, I personally believe in education. I think it's absolutely vital. It's why I partly why I co-founded Property Tribes with my husband Nick. And it's also, partly why I do webinars like this and with other content collab creators, because I want to help educate landlords. I think it's so important. But there's what I call authentic education, Adam, and then there's inauthentic education. And authentic education to me is when you are told the good things and the bad things, the positives, the negatives. You're warned of all the pitfalls. And if there is an agenda behind that education, that agenda is transparent. I don't have a problem with that at all. I welcome it. I support it. What I have a problem with is what I call inauthentic education, where only the good things are told. You're put into a high pressurized situation to buy a training course that could cost tens of thousands of pounds. And very often, a lot of these courses aren't delivered upon properly, or if you start to feel that you're not getting value for money and you complain, you get blocked from them. I mean, as I said, this is the wealth creation side of the industry is totally unregulated, and a lot of very vulnerable people get sucked into it and they lose a lot of money. What I would say is the authentic side of the industry is education from industry stakeholders like the NRLA, like ALA. There's a few really good courses out there, and also authentic education like we're doing today, like you can get on Property Tribes, where it's just community generated information and sharing. There's no agenda behind it. Those are the places to go where you can get authentic education and be shown the risks and be told the truth. You're not going to get into property with no money, no deposit, not enough income to qualify for mortgage finance. You'll be sold all these things like rent to rent and lease options, but then again, the devil is in the detail of those. And on Property Tribes, we get so much fallout from when these things go wrong. So I guess that's my summary of it in the relatively short space of time we have left to discuss, Adam.
Yeah, and I just agree, really. I mean, if anything sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Property's a great investment, but it's time consuming, it's expensive, and you have to be patient. For it to come good, you just have to be patient. Time is the biggest factor in it, I think. And anyone who's saying you're going to make a lot of money in a short space of time with putting little in, it's just not true. They may have made it work, probably because they've been lucky, or they're not being truthful. So it's, as you said, just go to the places that are giving you good information, aren't asking you to pay out lots of money to get that information, and aren't making ridiculous claims, basically.
Yeah, well, that's very good advice, because some of the cost of these training courses, they are the equivalent to the deposit on a property. I had an interesting, I did some numbers recently on a rent-to-rent deal. The poor young chap paid 10,000 each for them. That's 10,000 for each rent-to-rent deal before he'd made a penny on them. And he was told that they would make £1,000 a month each. In reality, these deals, which were sold by somebody that had been on one of these courses, they were making £300 net between them. So he'd paid 12,000 to go on a course. Then he'd met a deal sourcer on the course who had been trained by this particular trainer, and he bought these two deals. And I worked out that it would take, I think, 5.5 years for him to go back to the same financial position he was in before he went on the course. Now, this is important because numbers never lie in property. They never lie. Maths can't lie. If you put the right inputs in, you'll get the right outputs. So if you're thinking of spending 12, 15, 20,000 pounds on a course, think about how that money could be used to actually buy a property, and how long and how successful will you have to be to recoup that 20,000 pounds. Now, I've heard of mentoring that costs between 50, sometimes there's one mentor that charges 100,000 pounds a year. I think it's utterly ridiculous. A good, fairly priced course should not cost more than 500 pounds per day, in my opinion.
Yeah. And if you're thinking about doing something, come into Property Tribes, come into Mashroom Facebook community, and put the details in there, and you'll have a lot of landlords advise you that may have been through it, or may have understanding of the kind of scheme and the details of it, and you'll get good advice, and you'll get a good understanding of what it's all about.
I think also to highlight here is that, unfortunately, these courses are attended by the vulnerable.
100%.
I think it's just unfortunately there's not many Bill Gates which are attending these webinars, and I think that's a good way to highlight it. If these people are spending their last 5, 10, 15,000 pounds on this potentially life-saving or world-changing course, those people shouldn't be on those courses. These are real investments that we're talking about. These are high net worth and sophisticated investments that people are going into, and it just doesn't always add up. I mean, the scenario you just gave a moment ago, Vanessa, based on that scenario, it sounds like he wasn't buying any assets. He was buying an idea.
Exactly. He was buying hot air.
He was buying an idea, or based on this bit of paper here, I've worked out that you can earn, you can't see that, but based on this bit of paper here, I've worked out that you will earn X, Y, Z. Give me 20 grand for it, essentially is the gist of it. And I think that's really unfortunate. I don't deny, and I think the, not necessarily caveat, but to go back to, I think the first sentence that you said, Vanessa, is that none of us deny that rent to rent or any other schemes out there have made people money. However, I don't think that somebody standing at the front should be worth 20 grand at a time, if you catch my drift there. And that's where I think the difference is. And I think that's where the highlighting should really be.
Well, rent to rent itself is unregulated. If it goes wrong, the landlord suffers, the subtenant suffers, but the head tenant just walks away. I mean, I've had a case recently where there's a multiple offender rent-to-renter who is going around taking deposits off, taking money off landlords to introduce them to these deals, and then he's taking money off the subtenants, and he's keeping it, and he's keeping their deposits. Now, he's done this 3 times already, and the 3 investors that have got in touch with me about this individual have between them lost over 25,000, plus their tenants have lost their money and their rent and their deposits. So there's again a bigger picture to this, but anything, Adam hit the nail on the head, and we could have just summarized it in one sentence. If it sounds too good to be true, it is, without fail, every time, no exceptions. And if you have any doubts about anything, go on to Mashroom Community Group, go on to Property Tribes and say, look, I've heard about this course, I'm interested in this, what do people think? And you will get an unbiased, community-driven response with no agenda behind it, just to try and help you. And that's a good way to protect yourself. But we all here agree with education, but it's got to be done in the right format.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Well, we had one more section, but we might have to knock it into the next webinar. We were going to go head to head on city versus suburbs. So maybe. Oh,
Adam, you kindly, just as we round this off, you kindly mentioned that I could mention my court case. Some of you will probably be aware that due to my consumer protection activities, where I've used public domain resources like Companies House and NDLA and financial profiling, etc., to try and help people make wise choices about which trainers to go with. Because of that, I'm now being sued by one of these trainers, and he has taken me to the High Court for harassment and defamation, and I am facing a very, very, very expensive legal battle. And thankfully, the community has rallied behind me. I've started a crowd justice campaign page to help me with my legal costs, and I've so far raised over 32,000. And I've had the support of industry leaders like Ben Beadle, the CEO of the NRLA, and also Paul Champlina and Kate Faulkner and other leading people in the sector. And I just wanted to say, if you would like to learn more about my case and what's happening to me, after this webinar, I will go and drop a link to my crowd justice page on the Mashroom community Facebook group with the kind permission of Mashroom. And if you would like to read what's happened to me, and you agree that people such as myself with knowledge should be allowed to comment in the public interest, I would really appreciate it if you could make a donation. Even if it's only £5, every penny helps. My legal bills are going to be somewhere in the region of £650,000.
That's scary, isn't it? Very scary. Well, thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate it. Fascinating conversation, as always. We'll be back on the 15th of July, you mentioned him, at 3 p.m. with Paul Champolina talking about Section 8 and Section 21 and the change in evictions. And we'll do a deeper dive then into some evictions and what you might see and might not see. I'll be able to talk about some personal experience of that as well. So it's always a fascinating webinar when we've got Paul on board. He's a brilliant industry commentator. He's absolutely fantastic.
Andrew has just said, what is Property Tribes? Well, I hope you don't mind me quickly saying that's the forum, the Landlord and Property Investor Forum I co-founded with my husband, Nick, who you may have seen on GB News this morning because he's out in Ukraine rescuing pets at the front line. So he's very busy doing that. I'm busy on the property front. Propertytribes.com is where you can go and dive in. We've got over 75,000 members and we're talking about property and landlord issues all day long and all night long. So I hope to see you on there.
A great website. And George, did you want to say one final word about Mashroom and some of our products?
Yeah, I mean, I highlighted a few of them at the beginning, but I think, look, we've dropped a few hints throughout this webinar, as I'm sure we've all gathered here. But we're here to help Mashroom. I, along with the rest of the team, are here to listen to you, find out what it is, and produce the products that we can do. The Mashroom community page is really, really useful. A lot of our landlords use it and go on there and discuss some of the products that we have. But ultimately, drop me over an email. We can work with you. Getting your listing live on the platform takes you away from the expensive side of the high street agents. We can do all this for you for free. Whether you need some compliance checks, some insurances, mortgages, whatever it is, we can help out. What I try to instill within all of our landlords is, yes, we're an online tech company, but we're all very much human at the end of the day. Come and chat to us and we'll help you out. So yeah.
Brilliant. We'll see everyone again on the 15th. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for coming and joining us. Goodbye.
Yes, thank you, everybody, for joining us. See you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.